So welcome to Love on Both Sides, a podcast about what?
Podcast about a neurodiverse couple. I'm neurotypical. I'm Melanie Meier, and this is my husband, Courtney Atkinson, and he is neurodiverse.
And what do we do, Melanie?
We run a team together. We own businesses together, have a family, and obviously we live together.
Yeah, we love each other too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems to be going pretty well.
So far.
So we've been together how many years? 17 years?
No.
15 years?
About 15 years. Married 10, going on 11 here.
Yeah.
And been in business together for pretty much most of that time.
Why don't you tell this interesting story about how we learned that my brain worked a little bit differently from our friend and famous musician, Shayla Miller.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, I would like to back it up first and talk about what it was like before we learned about this information. Because, this is part of the neurodiverse relationship is you've got one person who likes to jump ahead. And, once you understand some of these patterns that a neurodiverse person has,
The randomness,
it's much easier to guide or refocus conversations or even like how I would perceive what you're after.
Or the interruptions.
The interruptions, yeah. And so I know from what you do commonly, what's different from me is you'll start at the end and work back. And I start from the beginning and work forward. And so sometimes you may see a redirection in where we're going with conversation.
I've never really considered that, but that was a big challenge for us, right? Like you'd be like, whoa.
Well, yeah, it was a lot. And so I would say that's why I want to talk about the experience before, because I think a lot of people land on this channel seeking answers, looking for answers, and looking for people that have similar experiences that they can both say, right? The neurodiverse person and the neurotypical person can essentially say I get that, I see that. And maybe they don't even know that they're neurodiverse.
Yeah.
And why that's such a big deal and why that makes such a difference. So the experience of before we learned that Courtney had ADHD first, and then subsequently, I think it was a year after we learned that you were autistic. Yeah. But before that, it was a little bit bumpy at times, right?
Was it?
I think I felt the bumpy maybe a bit more than you.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And I would say looking back now at the start of our relationship, it started then. And it would start with love bombing. And for all of you,
really good at it.
Really good at it. A lot of messages and hyper focus on me. And so it's really difficult. I'm sure a lot of people out there that are just entered into a relationship with a neurodiverse person would feel this, where you're just love bombed. You feel so connected and there's so much time and you're a priority. And, with the hyper focus of the ADHD on an individual, that eventually wanes, as most things do. Once you felt safe and secure, then you pulled back once you knew I liked you. I guess one of the biggest things I've learned about you is you do a lot of things because you want people to like you. I don't know if you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I can. Well, that's related to RSD, which is another thing that's common with people who are diagnosed with ADHD. And
do you want to say what RSD is for those that don't know?
I will. RSD is rejection sensitive dysphoria. And you can check that out. But essentially, it just means that you are desperate for attention and for people to like you, and that you are hardwired to do whatever it'll take to make that happen. So for me, that meant that, as a kid now, retrospectively, it all makes a lot of sense, right? But, growing up, not having the ability to recognize social cues so well, and being an interrupter and having random thoughts and all these things. The RSD, I think, was in a lot of ways a blessing because it gave me motivation to learn social cues and to learn patterns in behaviors and scripts and things to say and do that would enamor me to others so that I could have them like me, appreciate me, and so that I could collect friends.
Be one hell of a salesperson.
Please love me. So that's, I think that's where that started, Mel, was with RSD.
And it's actually rejection sensitivity disorder.
No, it's dysphoria.
Oh, is it? Because the ones that I've looked at with...
Here, let's look it up right now. Hey, chat, tell me about RSD as it relates to ADHD. Is it rejection sensitive dysphoria or is it rejection sensitive disorder?
No, you said dysmorphia before.
I said dysphoria.
Dysphoria?
Yeah. Rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's not a disorder, Melanie.
Oh, My apologies. I picked that up from, because I've always seen it as disorder. When
But they
I
don't
researched
label
it.
us that way anymore.
Fair enough. Things change. There are changes. Yeah.
I'm also epileptic. Does that have anything to do with any of this? I don't know.
No, that's just.
It's just a little bit of drugs when I was 12.
Oh, actually, it does have a lot to do with ADD.
Does it?
Yeah, well, for sure, because if you're doing risky behavior, right? Like people with ADD, ADHD have riskier behavior. And so if you're a young man who is doing risky behavior, like eating a bunch of hash when you're 12, that would
Shouldn't do that.
bring on the onset of epilepsy for the rest of your life. That's not something that I would have done.
No. That didn't stop me either. I thought, well, how much worse can it get than epilepsy? I'll just keep getting high.
He's grown up since then.
I have. So yeah, now that we've laid that framework for, some of the backstory, and I'm sure through, sequential episodes, we can tell funny stories about all of my, all the ways that I barely survived my childhood and early adulthood through all these risky behaviors. Marriage. Yeah. No, it's true. And I think that's the place that I wanted to kind of pick it up was, back when you were talking about love bombing. And then, shortly after we began dating, we really started running this business together. I was a solo agent with a team, not doing a very good job. Melanie, you were a full-time executive and must have had some pity on me, really.
No, not really. I just like to help people. And when I see somebody in help that needs help, I just jump in. It's just part of my my makeup, if you will.
Yeah. And so Mel just started working at the office doing, her job. It was remote at the time. This was going back to 2000. What year was that? 2012, 13?
Well, I started in, I'd say 2008, 2009, helping you with organizing some of your marketing. And then eventually I started working out of the office to help manage the admin team, essentially.
Because I just left a bunch of blank checks around for everybody to write to themselves for their salaries and everything.
Yeah.
Mel didn't think that was a good idea.
It was a terrible idea. I never looked at it.
They're very trustworthy people. Still don't know.
They were trustworthy people. Yeah. But you've also gotten into business with untrustworthy people.
Yeah, we've had money stolen from us because of my inability to identify poor characters.
And your sense of urgency.
Yeah.
As you can tell, there's a lot of layers that you're going to see in upcoming podcasts based on topic and and then symptoms that just pop up.
Yeah.
On both sides, right?
Yeah.
Not just him, but so.
And so painting the picture of how this all began, it was in the early days of a busy realtor growing a team, super chaotic, right? I was selling a load of houses and we had a small team of 4 or 5 people. And those are the days of everybody doing everything, which actually works really well for my brain, right? There's so much to do. There's a dumpster fire everywhere you look.
You had to control everything.
I had to control everything. I was, in the early stages, the person who knew how to control everything. And there was nobody else that could do a lot of that stuff, in part because it was sales and it was chaotic and I wasn't making room or space for anybody else to do that.
Yeah, you wouldn't let go.
I wouldn't let go. And then I think eventually that kind of started to burn me out. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I would say it wasn't until recently that you started letting go of the control, like in the last year.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how you see the relationship and the marriage. I almost see it in 3 chunks, right? Not Hollywood, honeymoon phase, right? The love bombing, and then the love bombing stops and you're in marriage. And
so that'd be the first, 7 years or so?
No. I would say that was probably the first 3-4 years. And I can pinpoint that because I would identify when things started to change for me anyways, was when I went from full on love bomb and the focus and engagement and all that to that 1 year where you just forgot literally everything. And that was 10 years ago because it was my first Mother's Day. This is why I remember it.
Oh my God.
That 1 year. So this would be the start of, I would say, the sandwich period of the hardest part of our marriage.
This was so bad.
Yeah. So forgot Valentine's Day, my birthday, Mother's Day, which was the first Mother's Day.
Easter.
Well, Easter I don't really care about Easter. Our anniversary and Christmas. Everything, the entire lot. And then from there, it kind of just spilled over into other things. But in your defense, now that I know that it wasn't intentional, it's a symptom, that makes it a lot easier, right? If you think there's intention, then it's a bit harder to get around. But now that I know that it's not intentional, I now looking back, I get it. But at the time, it was devastating, right? Because I went from like all the love to now like stripped of it. Yeah.
And my perspective was that I just had too much on the go. Like I was able to manage the business, or at least like my responsibilities in the business, and I was able to manage our relationship. But then we threw a kid into the mix. And it's like that third thing was just like wheels off all buses immediately, right? And in that year, Mel was really good. You've managed this whole like your side of the relationship really, really well, and probably like clinically well. I don't know that it would have been dramatically different had you known then that I had ADHD and all this stuff. But she was really calm. She's like, listen, we got this kid in the house now. I need you home for dinners. I need you home, in the mornings. And we just built a schedule. And so like it was almost immediate that I started taking time off work, and then Sundays and Saturdays, and then evenings completely off. And then,
But that was a conversation before conception, because you're like, I want a baby, and I'm like, I want a husband and a father.
right. But it happened far more quickly and urgently than I anticipated. Like it was like, okay, now I was expecting it to come, but there wasn't like all this infrastructure set up. It was just like, okay, so now I'm just not working these nights. And I just managed to make it work because it was the expectation and you were super chill about it. And
I'm very clear about my boundaries.
Yeah,
and
you always have been.
expectations. Yeah.
But I need that. Like that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Mel is that she's not bitchy about these things. Is that you'll just say like, I need this. Yeah, like I need it, but like, hey, could you do this, or I need this, or whatever. And that for me creates like a guardrail. Like I work really well with guardrails. Most people who are on the spectrum or have ADHD like focus best when there's less to worry about. And so like I think of like the universe being infinite and completely open, and there being like all these different realms, and that can be overwhelming. But like if I have somebody or me put some guardrails on it, then I just know, okay, like there's at least a highway that I'm traveling down instead of just like infinite space all around me.
Yeah.
It's made it a lot easier for sure.
Yeah. And then so part of that period too, like some of that sandwich period, which I would, identify as like between honeymoon and between an evolved relationship and understanding, in that time frame as well. I think you just became more comfortable and more safe. And so some of those symptoms just started to come out more. And one of the things that you've mentioned a lot, and you mentioned this even before you were diagnosed, that, you thought that you had a learning disability because you would have to hear things a certain way, or you'd have to hear them once or, well, you have to hear them 2 or 3 times for it to sink in.
Or I'd have to make the same mistake twice
Yes.
before I could learn. And like, we probably won't get into some of these.
About what they were. Yeah, no, we won't. But let's just say I'm a very clear individual about expectations and boundaries. And so when we got into the relationship, I'm like, here's the 5 things I will not tolerate. And he did 2 of those things, and they're not bad things. Like they're not like sold as you didn't murder anybody. He wasn't, huffing gas or snorting cocaine or anything like that. It's just like things from my past that I knew would be bothersome to me. And the first time I caught it, I was like, I don't like that. And you're like, understood, won't happen again. And then the second time it happened, because my brain processes things and like, you've made a promise and now you've broken it.
And now you're a liar.
And now I've lost my goddamn mind.
Well, now you've lost trust.
Yeah.
Right. And
so I'm like, I've told you this.
Yeah. And
because
you're thinking like, well, it's fucking simple and easy. Like, just don't do this thing. Don't be a dick. And so for a person with ADHD, we're notoriously seeking hits of dopamine, right? And the challenge when you're accustomed to receiving hits of dopamine, or when you don't have normal amounts, is that like those regular feedback loops don't work so well. Like you really do need to get slapped almost. And like the first one, I was like, oh, my subconscious mind, I'm thinking, well, that just really wasn't that big a deal. She said not to do this, but like, she must not really mind it that much. No, she fucking minds it. Just
my reaction to things weren't on the scale of your reactions.
Yeah.
It didn't register.
Yeah, it just didn't until the second time. And I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, that she was serious.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like tied into all of that, then, like it's rebuilding. And, I think that also comes down to like when you did those things. I would say this would be the start of, phase 3. When you did those things.
So you think phase 3 is like since those occurrences?
No, I think phase 3 is the start of when you were diagnosed.
So 2
with,
years ago, say.
yeah, with ADHD.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent diagnosis of autism, which was all, but I would say that would be the start, because what that did for me is once I learned that he had ADHD, and it actually came from a friend of ours, a good friend of ours. She had at that time maybe met Courtney twice, and she said to me in passing, like, "Oh, Courtney and his ADHD," and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, 100% he has ADHD." Sure enough, he does. And so the first thing I did, and this is when it was like glaringly obvious to me about how different our brains were. You immediately go and pick up a book about the brain, and it's very science heavy, and you're learning everything you can about why your brain behaves that way. I go and I pick up a book called The ADHD Effect on Marriage so that I could better understand the impact of that between us. And I came to you and I said, "Hey, I read this book. It's amazing. I now have a lot more empathy and compassion for you, and I think you'd have a lot more empathy and compassion for me if you read it." And you're like, "I'm not reading that. Read this science book." And I'm like, "I'm not reading that." You're like, "Read it." And I'm like, "I'm not reading that. There's no benefit to me. I don't care. I'm not good at science. It doesn't matter. What matters to me is a healthy and fruitful relationship. Can you please just give this a go?" And you did. And you even say that that book was transformational in understanding my experience, because I think
Yeah.
up until that point, you just thought I had it cake or easy, and you didn't recognize that your symptoms have a very big impact on my life as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of great tidbits in that book, The ADHD Effect on Marriage, and we've recommended it to, I don't know, 100
Everybody
people.
that I see that has ADHD
Yeah,
was
go
married.
get the book. It's really good.
By Melissa Orlov.
Yeah. Uh, and you're right. Like for me, it allowed me to view my patterns in an objective third person's perspective about how they would be received by you, but not in a judgmental fashion, just in an objective fashion. Like, oh shit, that's gonna suck. Um, and the book does a good job of building mutual empathy. It doesn't criticize or demonize any one particular party. It really does a great job at explaining the different perspectives, and so that's why I liked it, and I think that book opened up a lot of potential for me to consider additional behaviors in that same way, like from that third person standpoint, like, oh shit, like I wonder if this isn't another instance. And so I'll tell you something, and I don't know how much you've heard this from me or if at all, but like I just used to think that Mel was like bullshitting me all the time. Because like here's the thing, right? So when you're autistic and neurodivergent in all these ways, you have to build a roadmap to navigate the world, right? Like you have, and I look at it like there's puzzles out there that I have to solve, and then they form part of my GPS system.
Starting from the destination, working back on the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like that's why I ask so many questions all the time. That's why I'm deep into ChatGPT all the time. Like I got to figure things out and then just lock it into the GPS, and then I'm good. So when I didn't have this knowledge and I wasn't aware of any of these things being symptoms or whatever, when Mel would tell me how she was feeling, I would just think like, well, that's just a manipulation tactic. Like, because for me, like with RSD, like everything is strategic, right? Like I didn't ever really have a great sense of how people were feeling necessarily like a great deal of empathy. I could just see what needed to happen. And I just assumed that everybody else was like that. I'm like, well, she's just trying to get me to do this thing, right? And so she'd say like, well, this thing really hurt my feelings. And I wouldn't hear hurt feelings. I'd hear, I want you to be different.
Yeah. Or what you say a lot to me is like, you keep calling me a piece of shit. And I've not once called you a piece of shit. Like I remember recently I said to you, if you're looking for evidence of being called a piece of shit, you're not going to find it, but you're looking for that. You're not looking for the evidence of me loving you when I say I love you more than anything that I say to you. But your brain will just like take that over and flip things. And so it was really hard for you, I think, to hear me because you would interpret that in such a way that would provide evidence to me not liking you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, being kind of pre-wired to not be liked. And plus the other thing that I'm sure that, our listeners have heard before is that by the time a kid with a kid that's neurodivergent or ADHD reaches the age of 12, they've heard 40,000 more negative bits of feedback about their personality and their behavior.
Yeah, I think it was like I've seen 20,000 a lot, but I think
Yeah.
it's earlier than 12.
Oh, okay.
Like it's more formative years.
Yeah, and so I think, from my standpoint, I had great sensitivity to negative feedback. That's just all there is to it. And so then being so sensitive to it, I would extrapolate it like from all these different places where really it didn't have any business being extrapolated from. But that's just the way we work, right? When we have these childhood traumas, we develop great skills of finding justifications for them existing, right? Like we'll find that everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just the way the human brain works. I'd like to know more about why that is, but that's not necessarily the point of why we're here today. We're here to talk about the journey and how we landed here and keeping the wheels on our business bus and our family bus and what that's meant through this diagnosis and these 3 phases of the relationship, getting together, the love bombing, and we can call kids and whatever madness that was all about. And then
I feel like that, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I feel like that period of time was Courtney time, because you'll hear me say this quite a bit. So this wouldn't be new to you, where I'd be like, I've listened to you for a decade.
I've heard you say that like yesterday.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe not yesterday, 2 days ago or whatever.
Because I would share my feelings and you would get defensive, right? Because I've only recently started sharing my feelings in the last couple of years, right? Like I'm new to sharing the depth of my emotions. And so when I did, you would get defensive and angry. And I'm like, I have listened to you for a decade. So I feel like that's just my perspective. I know you might have a different one, but I'm like, okay, that was Courtney's time. And I feel like this time now is partnership time.
Yeah, and that was mirrored in the business in a lot of ways too. Like if you think about the way that
100%.
my ego showed up during that time of business and
how you wanted me to be more like you.
Yeah. There's so many things that we're going to be unpacking here through the course of all these episodes. So many of the things that we've just touched on will be entire episodes. That concept of an unreasonable expectation that Mel be more like me when that would be the worst conceivable thing, having 2 people like me in sharing an office or a house.
Well, I think you were just striving for that because that's what you knew and that's what you were comfortable with. And I am such a different personality than you ever, I'm assuming you've ever been with. Like I'm different from your first wife.
Yeah.
I'm assuming I'm different from your past girlfriends.
Yeah.
Well, for one,
it's been a minute since
my name's not Jennifer.
Had a lot of Jennifers.
Run of Jennifers there.
Yeah.
But like being involved with an individual who is so calm and so accommodating.
Yeah.
Eventually I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, all those things are coping strategies, right? I was using my ego as a way of coping with pain, and you were using, well-proven strategies of suppression for coping with your pain. And I think you were like the primary instigator of that being enough of that whole situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Mel will tell you in some future episode about how that all manifested and where that came from. Today is not the day for that, but it's a great story. You're gonna want to stick around for that one. And like your level of fucks given for being heard and seen and safe, went away. You're just like, this is the way it's gonna be, folks. Court, kids, anyone, yeah, and kind of out of nowhere. And so that was a big adjustment period, but that's kind of like the best conceivable scenario for somebody who's wired like me, because slow, painful changes are like boring and annoying. Like I would just rather just have a grenade thrown and the landscape entirely changed and pivot over the span of, whatever short period of time rather than a decade.
Yeah, where it's like, this is what is happening right now.
Yeah. And this is the way it will be forevermore. Starting today.
Yeah. I'm pretty quick to like adjust.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And that was tough for me, this adjustment phase and learning to be a better partner and learning to hear more and not judge it and not be defensive about it and like receive it objectively and not make it about me. Right.
Yeah.
Recognizing that there were some behaviors that may like fuel some of that pain, but your pain is your pain, And the best thing that I could learn to do is to not be defensive about you having pain around me, but just to soothe the pain, regardless of whether or not I held the match that lit it at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that we've talked about lots, right? Is that when you're in a business relationship and you're in love and you're raising kids, like you carry, the salve for the wound, but you also carry the match and the dynamite.
Yep.
Right.
You're the trigger and the safety.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for both of us. Although I think we've both gotten pretty good at recognizing the trigger.
Yeah.
Like that's another thing on its own.
Yeah, we'll talk lots about that in future episodes. Today, in this introductory episode, we just wanted to talk about the fact that it's a fucking grind. There's so much to learn, and running business is complicated. Growing, babies in your belly's a whole situation, and then keeping them alive, that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And, for us, we've traveled a lot. We have a coaching business and a real estate team and, I don't know, dozens, hundreds of people that we support. And so I think it can be challenging when you have like personal struggles that are like serious and deep and beyond your ability to cope. And then you still have to, be out here putting on a face, doing all the things that the people need you to do. Like I can recall at the very beginning of this kind of transformational period that we're talking about here in the last 2 years, like, God, there were times where I was like, holy fuck, like, how are we going to make it through this? Like I don't have the energy to show up to this meeting and do the things that people need me to do. And I know that you felt the same too, right? Like it was really, really tough. But I think the takeaway from this kind of introductory, video or whatever is just that with communication and a commitment to a plan, some counseling, some reading, you're great on podcasts.
The desire to learn and understand about the other person's perspective, and the desire to learn and understand the roots of your things as well has been amazing. That's basically what this podcast is about. That's the evolution of our relationship. And moving forward, it's just going to be little stories with, I would say most of it's going to be story based with like, what did we learn from that? Because all of our learnings have come from chaos or a match. It's been fireworks. And we're like, all right, what did we learn from that? And I think once we identified that and once we approached it as like, okay, there's this really big fight, and we're going to use that fight as an opportunity to learn. Like you hear this all the time in business, right? Like whatever you fail at, use it as an opportunity to learn. And I think a lot of people will do that in their business, in schooling, in their life outside of the relationship without actually doing it in their relationship. And it's been mounds of evidence and to show that has created perhaps one of the biggest impact in a successful relationship, in a more joyful and peaceful relationship.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we don't ever have fights, but I think the big difference now, and I'll be curious to hear what you have to say, is we used to get really, really stuck in like the comparison and the negotiation of the symptoms. My symptoms are worse than your symptoms, and you did this and I did that, and if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't. It's like that kind of back and forth, and those fights can't resolve. Like there's no.
Yeah, well, you got a fact-based brain, right? Yeah. And so you're like the fact. I'm like, well, that's your perspective, but those aren't facts.
Yeah, and then where we have landed and what's served us really well is to, first of all, I would say be open and vulnerable enough to spend the time sharing about our collective traumas. Everybody has them, and I don't think either one of us knew the extent to which the other's experience had impacted them, probably for ourselves and for the other. And so we had to spend a lot of time uncovering that. And then as we did, we could find ways that trauma would roll up into symptoms and justifying, a lot of the feelings that we had that might have been false around perceptions and perspectives. And with that, now I find like I can more objectively, not perfectly, but more often I can say, hey, like this reaction that I might be getting from you comes from this place. And so I won't receive it defensively and feel like I need to react to it. I can just let that simmer. It's not about me. I can see where it's coming from. Whereas normally I'd be running for the gas jug, and 2 sticks of dynamite, because that's what people do, right? They're like, what do you mean? Like, you can't say that to me. And like, here's more fire.
Well, that's your dopamine too, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
Turns out, because I'm by nature a very calm person, and like when you love somebody, they know your triggers, they know what's going to get you going. And with a neurodivergent partner, sometimes they look for that dopamine hit and subconsciously can just bring a bottle or a jug of kerosene to a picnic.
Yeah. It's not a conscious thing.
No, I know that.
It's just a thing that happens, right? Where you've been wired that way.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're interested in learning about neurodivergent relationships in business, if you're interested in learning about neurodivergent relationships that are happy and sexy and fun, tune in if you want to hear how we're raising kids, one of whom's for sure neurodivergent, another who may be. Then yeah, we're going to be talking about all those things. And
also childhood sexual abuse, because that's mine, right? So my childhood sexual abuse informs and impacts my life.
Yeah, sure it does.
So that gets wrapped in as well.
Yeah, and mine's not really worth talking about. It's just probably like a lot of people's, just hurts. And, maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. We'll talk about mine too when the time comes. And so yeah, if you're interested in those things, hang out and we'll have lots more for you.